for bullets rip through Tupac Shakur's body at a Las Vegas intersection. 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, 1 in the thigh. 6 days later, he's dead at 25. One of the greatest rappers of all time, murdered in a drive-by shooting. For 27 years, no arrests, no charges, case cold. Then a gang leader published a book bragging about how he did it. As we continue with this case, like, share, smash that subscribe button if you want justice for Tupac. Drop a microphone below. A man confessed to murder in his own book. Now he's facing life in prison. Comment. Should he get life? Duane Keefe D. Davis wrote Compton Street Legend in 2019. The back cover said, "The last living eyewitness to Tupac's murder is telling his story." Inside, a full confession. He described being in the white Cadillac, obtaining a .40 caliber Glock, passing it to his nephew in the back seat, following Tupac's BMW to a red light, pulling up alongside. For shots, Tupac dead. Davis thought his 2009 immunity deal protected him. He thought he could brag about killing a legend and walk free. He was wrong. September 29, 2023, 27 years later, Las Vegas police arrest Davis at his home in Henderson, Nevada. Body camera footage shows officers approaching him on a residential street. Calm demeanor. Duane Davis, you're under arrest for the murder of Tupac Shakur. At a press conference hours later, Lieutenant Jason Johansson announced, Duane Davis was the shot caller for this group of individuals that committed this crime. He orchestrated the plan that was carried out. 1 count of murder with use of a deadly weapon. Life in prison if convicted. The arrest shocked the world. After 27 years, someone was finally charged. The first and only person ever arrested for Tupac's murder. But how did police catch him? Simple. He confessed. Multiple times. In a book. In documentaries. In interviews. On podcasts. For years, Davis bragged about being in that white Cadillac. He described the shooting. He named the other men in the car. He explained the motive. And he thought he was untouchable. Chief Deputy District Attorney Mark DiGiacomo told the court that Davis ordered the death of Tupac Shakur, that he was the on-ground, on-site commander. The motive? Hours before the shooting, Tupac and Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight beat Davis's nephew Orlando Anderson in the MGM Grand Hotel lobby. Security cameras captured everything. Tupac threw the first punch. Suge Knight stomped on Anderson while he was down. That beating triggered retaliation. Davis and 3 other Southside Compton Crips members got a gun, got in a white Cadillac, and hunted Tupac down. They found him at a red light on Flamingo Road, shot him 4 times, sped away. Tupac died 6 days later on September 13, 1996, at University Medical Center. His mother Afeni made the decision to remove life support. Time of death, 4:03 p.m. The world mourned. Who killed Tupac? No one knew. The case went cold. Witnesses wouldn't talk. Suge Knight, who was driving the BMW, told police he heard something, but saw nothing. Members of Tupac's entourage refused to cooperate. The suspected shooter, Orlando "Baby Lane" Anderson, was questioned once. He denied everything. Police let him go. 2 years later, in 1998, Anderson was killed in an unrelated gang shooting. He was 23. The other 2 men in the Cadillac also died. DeAndre "Big Dre" Smith died in 2004. Terrence "Bubble Up" Brown was shot and killed in 2015. That left Keefe D, the last man standing, the only survivor, and he couldn't keep his mouth shut. In 2009, Davis made a deal with LAPD detectives. He was facing federal drug charges. They offered immunity. Talk about unsolved murders, walk free on the drug case. Davis talked. He admitted being in the Cadillac. He described the shooting. He implicated his nephew as the shooter. But the immunity deal protected those statements. Prosecutors couldn't use them. Davis walked. He should have stayed quiet. Instead, he went on a media tour. 2018. Appeared in the Netflix docuseries Unsolved, admitting his role. 2019. Published Compton Street Legend, describing the murder in detail. 2020 to 2023, multiple podcast interviews bragging about being there. He thought the immunity deal covered everything. Didn't. It only covered the 2009 interview. Everything he said afterward, his book, his TV appearances, his podcasts, was fair game. July 17, 2023. Las Vegas police raided Davis's home. They seized electronics, photographs, his book. They found .40 caliber ammunition, the same type used to kill Tupac. 2 months later, arrest. Davis appeared in court October 4, 2023. Jumpsuit. Shackled. He pleaded not guilty. His attorney Ross Goodman told reporters, "There's no gun, there's no car, and there's no witnesses from 27 years ago. But prosecutors have Davis's confessions. His book, his interviews, his own words. It's called a confession," one legal expert said. Davis now claims he's innocent. He says the book was exaggerated for profit, that the interviews were entertainment, that he wasn't even in Las Vegas that night. "They ain't got no evidence," Davis told a podcast in 2024. "They can't even place me out here. No gun, no car, no Keefe D, no nothing." If convicted, Davis, now 62 years old, faces life in prison. Will a jury believe his confessions? Or will they buy his new story, that he made it all up for fame and money? To understand this case, you need to understand that night. September 7th, 1996. The Mike Tyson fight. The MGM Grand beating. The drive-by that killed a legend. This is the story of how Tupac Shakur was murdered. How the case went cold for 27 years. How a gang leader's ego brought him down. And how justice finally might be served. September 7th, 1996. Las Vegas, Nevada. It started as a celebration. A night of boxing, partying, and hip-hop royalty taking over the Vegas Strip. By the end of the night, one of the biggest stars in music would be fighting for his life. Tupac Shakur arrived in Las Vegas that afternoon with his fiancée Kidada Jones, his cousins, and friends. They were there to watch the Mike Tyson vs. Bruce Seldon heavyweight championship fight at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Tupac and Tyson were friends. They had met back in 1991 at a party in Los Angeles. Tyson had helped Tupac and his crew get into the venue when security was giving them trouble. Tupac never forgot it. So when Tyson invited him to the fight, Tupac said yes. Also in Las Vegas that night, Suge Knight, CEO of Death Row Records. Knight had purchased dozens of tickets and invited the entire Death Row family. Tupac was Death Row's biggest star. Knight was there to support his fighter and his artist. The fight was scheduled to start around 8:30 p.m. Tyson was defending his WBC heavyweight title. Seldon held the WBA title. This was a unification bout, but the fight wouldn't last long. At approximately 8:30 p.m., Tupac and Suge Knight took their front row seats. The arena was packed. Nearly 10,000 people in attendance. The opening bell rang. 109 seconds later, it was over. Mike Tyson knocked out Bruce Seldon in the first round. A devastating technical knockout. The crowd went wild. Tupac was ecstatic. He congratulated Tyson just off the arena floor. They hugged. They celebrated. Then Tupac and the Death Row entourage headed toward the exit. The plan was to return to their hotels, change clothes, and meet up later at Club 662, a nightclub Suge Knight owned at 1700 East Flamingo Road. It was approximately 8:40 p.m. when Tupac left the arena. As he walked through the MGM Grand Hotel lobby, one of Knight's associates spotted someone. Trayvon Trey Lane, a member of the Mob Piru Bloods gang, an employee of Death Row Records. He pointed at a young man standing near the elevators. "That's him," Lane said. "That's the guy who tried to rob me." The man's name was Orlando Tive Anderson, also known as Baby Lane. He was 22 years old, a member of the Southside Compton Crips, a rival gang to the Bloods. Back in July 1996, 2 months earlier, Anderson and a group of Crips had confronted Lane at the Foot Locker inside Lakewood Center Mall in Lakewood, California. They tried to steal his Death Row medallion. The medallion was a gold chain given to Death Row employees by Suge Knight. It was a symbol of status. a target for rivals. Lane escaped without losing the chain, but he never forgot. And now, here was Orlando Anderson, alone. In the MGM Grand Lobby, Tupac heard what Lane said. He walked straight toward Anderson. "You from the South?" Tupac asked. Before Anderson could answer, Tupac punched him in the face. Anderson stumbled backward. He fell to the ground. Then Tupac, Suge Knight, and several others started stomping on him, kicking him, beating him. The attack lasted less than a minute. Hotel security rushed in and broke it up. Anderson was helped to his feet. The death row crew scattered. MGM Grand surveillance cameras captured the entire assault. Tupac can be seen clearly throwing the first punch. Suge Knight can be seen kicking Anderson while he's on the ground. Security detained Anderson briefly. They asked if he wanted to press charges or file a police report. Anderson declined. He just wanted to leave. Tupac and his group left the MGM Grand quickly. No arrests were made. It was approximately 8:50 p.m. For the next 2 hours, Tupac's exact movements are less clear. He and the death row entourage made a stop at the Luxor Hotel, where Kid Ada Jones was staying. Tupac told her about the fight. He promised to come back after the party at Club 662. They also stopped at a house Suge Knight owned in Las Vegas. Meanwhile, according to prosecutors, Orlando Anderson and his crew were preparing for retaliation. Anderson was with 3 other men that night, all members of the Southside Compton Crips, all from Los Angeles. His uncle, Duane Keefe D. Davis, age 33, a shot caller, a gang leader, a drug kingpin. The driver, Terrence Bubble Up Brown. The 4th man, DeAndre Big Dre Smith. According to prosecutors, after the MGM Grand beating, Davis retrieved a .40 caliber Glock pistol. He handed it to the men in the back seat, Anderson and Smith. They got into a white Cadillac. They drove toward Club 662. At approximately 11 p.m., Tupac was riding in the front passenger seat of a black 1996 BMW 750iL. Suge Knight was driving. Behind them, a convoy of luxury cars followed. Other death row artists, security, friends. They were heading to Club 662. As they drove down Las Vegas Boulevard, they were pulled over by Las Vegas Metro Police Bike Patrol. The music was too loud. The BMW had no license plates. Knight explained that the plates were in the trunk. The officers found them. They issued a warning. No ticket. The group was released. Tupac and Suge joked with the officers. They were in good spirits. It was approximately 11:05 p.m. 10 minutes later, everything changed. At 11:15 p.m., Tupac and Suge were stopped at a red light at the intersection of East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, right in front of the Maxim Hotel. A car carrying 2 women pulled up on their left. Tupac leaned out the window. He exchanged words with them. He invited them to Club 662. Then, a white 4-door Cadillac pulled up on their right side. The back window rolled down. Gunfire erupted. Rapid shots. A .40 caliber Glock fired from the back seat of the Cadillac. Tupac was hit 4 times. 2 bullets struck his chest. 1 hit his right arm. 1 hit his thigh. Suge Knight was grazed in the head by a bullet fragment, but he wasn't seriously injured. The Cadillac sped away into the Las Vegas night. Suge Knight tried to make a U-turn to get away from the intersection, but Tupac was panicking. He tried to climb into the back seat to escape the gunfire. Knight drove toward University Medical Center. Other cars in the convoy followed. Bystanders scattered. Chaos. Tupac was bleeding heavily. He was conscious but struggling to breathe. One of the bullets had punctured his right lung. By the time they reached the hospital, Tupac was in critical condition. Doctors performed emergency surgery. They removed his right lung. They tried to stop the internal bleeding. They did everything they could, but the damage was too severe. For 6 days, Tupac fought for his life. His mother, Afeni Shakur, stayed by his side. Friends visited. Members of his group, the Outlaws, guarded his hospital room, afraid that whoever shot him might come back to finish the job. On Friday, September 13, 1996, Tupac Shakur died of respiratory failure that led to cardiac arrest. He was 25 years old. His mother made the decision to remove him from life support. He was pronounced dead at 4:03 p.m. One of the greatest rappers of all time, gone. If you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Tupac Shakur was dead. One of the most famous rappers in the world. Shot in broad daylight on the Las Vegas Strip. In front of witnesses. Someone had to have seen something. Someone had to know who did it. But as Las Vegas Metro Police began their investigation, they hit a wall. No one was talking. Suge Knight was the only person in the car with Tupac. He was the one driving. He was grazed by a bullet. He witnessed the entire shooting. But when police tried to interview him, Knight was, in the words of investigators, uncooperative. Las Vegas police described Knight's statement as follows. He heard something, but saw nothing. That was it. The CEO of Death Row Records, the man who was driving the car, the man who could identify the shooters, refused to help. Sergeant Kevin Manning of the Las Vegas Metro Police told reporters at the time, "We didn't receive a whole lot of cooperation from Tupac's entourage. In the days following the shooting, Las Vegas police had no leads, no murder weapon, no suspects, no cooperation. Members of Tupac's group, the Outlaws, guarded him in the hospital. But they didn't talk to police either. They were afraid. Afraid that talking to cops would make them snitches. Afraid that giving names would put them in danger." One member of the Outlaws, Yafu Gaddafi Fula, was in the car directly behind Tupac's BMW. He witnessed the shooting. He could have identified the shooters. But Gaddafi left Las Vegas days after Tupac's death. He traveled to Atlanta, then Los Angeles, then settled in New Jersey with relatives. Compton police investigators assembled mugshots of several gang members, including Orlando Anderson. They hand-delivered the photos to Las Vegas Metro Police. Detectives called Gaddafi's lawyer to set up a meeting so Gaddafi could view the photos. According to Sergeant Manning, the calls were not returned. Officers never tried to locate Gaddafi. On November 10, 1996, just 2 months after Tupac's death, Yafu Gaddafi Fula was shot and killed in a housing project in Irvington, New Jersey. He was 19 years old. The only witness who might have identified Tupac's killers was now dead. Other members of Tupac's security team, including Frank Alexander, told the Los Angeles Times in early 1997 that they had never been asked by Las Vegas police to view photos of possible suspects, despite being at the scene, despite observing the shooting, despite seeing the men in the car. The investigation was falling apart. Within days of the shooting, Compton police received tips from informants. Retired Compton Gang Unit Officer Robert Ladd told DJ Vlad years later, "Within the next few days, we started getting calls from informants, and our first ones were saying, 'Hey, it's Keefe D and Orlando was the shooter. They're telling us that Bubble Up and Big Dre were in the car.' This is days after. This is informants telling us." So Compton police knew within days who was allegedly responsible. They knew the names. They knew the gang affiliation. But Las Vegas didn't pursue it. Orlando Baby Lane Anderson became a suspect. Las Vegas police interviewed him once. Briefly. Then they let him go. Anderson denied any involvement. He told Vibe magazine and the Los Angeles Times that Tupac was a hero he respected and admired. He said he had nothing to do with the shooting. Without physical evidence, without the murder weapon, without the white Cadillac, without cooperating witnesses, police had nothing to charge Anderson with. And Anderson was smart. He didn't confess. He didn't brag. He kept his mouth shut. For a while. According to law enforcement sources, after returning to Compton, Anderson reportedly dropped hints to fellow Crips members about his alleged role in killing Tupac. He allegedly bragged about it. Word spread. But still no charges. On May 29, 1998, less than 2 years after Tupac's death, Orlando Anderson was killed. He and a friend, Michael Reed Duro, were at a car wash in Compton. Anderson spotted Michael Stone, a member of a rival Crips set. There was a dispute over money Anderson believed Stone owed him. Tempers flared. A gunfight erupted. All 4 men were shot. Anderson, Stone, and Stone's nephew Jerry Stone all died at Martin Luther King Jr. Harbor Hospital. Orlando Baby Lane Anderson was 23 years old. The suspected triggerman in Tupac's murder was now dead. Never charged. Never arrested. Never brought to justice. The case went cold. Years passed. Tupac's murder remained unsolved. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some believed Suge Knight orchestrated the hit. Others thought it was connected to the East Coast-West Coast rap beef and that Bad Boy Records was involved. Some even theorized that corrupt LAPD officers were behind it. Books were written. Documentaries were made. Investigators chased leads. But nothing stuck. The murder weapon, a .40 caliber Glock, was never found. The white Cadillac was never located. And the 3 other men in the car that night stayed silent. Until 2009. That year, LAPD Detective Greg Kading was investigating the murder of Christopher Biggie Smalls Wallace, the notorious B.I.G., who was killed in Los Angeles on March 9, 1997, just 6 months after Tupac. Kading was working a task force focused on gang-related murders. As part of that investigation, he looked into the Tupac case. And he found something. Duane Keefe D. Davis was facing serious federal drug charges. He was looking at decades in prison. Kading approached Davis with a deal. Provide information about unsolved murders, including Tupac's, and receive immunity from prosecution. It's called a proffer agreement. Davis would talk. Prosecutors wouldn't use his statements against him. He'd walk on the drug charges. Davis took the deal, and he talked. In a recorded interview, Davis admitted that he was in the white Cadillac on the night of September 7, 1996. He admitted that he obtained a .40 caliber Glock pistol after the MGM Grand beating. He admitted that he passed the gun to the men in the back seat. His nephew Orlando Anderson and DeAndre Big Dre Smith. He described the shooting. He described following Tupac's BMW. He described pulling up alongside at the red light. And he strongly implied that his nephew Orlando was the one who pulled the trigger. But Davis wouldn't explicitly name the shooter. He cited street code. Snitches get stitches. Even with immunity, there were some lines he wouldn't cross. Still, his confession was explosive. Kading published his findings in a 2011 book called Murder Rap, The Untold Story of the Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur Murder Investigations. The book detailed Davis's confession. It laid out the timeline, connected the dots. But here's the problem. Because of the proffer agreement, Davis's 2009 confession couldn't be used against him in court. It was protected. So even though police now had a detailed account of what happened, even though they knew who was in the car, who supplied the gun, and who likely pulled the trigger, they couldn't charge Davis. He walked. The case stayed cold. But Duane Keefe D. Davis couldn't keep his mouth shut. What he did next will shock you. To understand why Tupac Shakur was murdered, you need to understand the war that was tearing hip-hop apart. The East Coast versus West Coast beef. A rivalry that started as competitive rap and ended with 2 dead legends. Tupac Shakur and Christopher Wallace, the notorious B.I.G., also known as Biggie Smalls, started as friends. Born in the Harlem neighborhood of New York City in 1971, Tupac's early life was marked by poverty and instability. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was a Black Panther activist. She raised Tupac with a revolutionary spirit. Biggie was born in Brooklyn in 1972, raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs. He sold drugs as a teenager before dedicating himself to rap. In 1993, Tupac met Biggie at a Los Angeles party. An intern named Dan Smalls, who worked with Biggie, recalled the meeting. Pac walks into the kitchen and starts cooking for us. He's in the kitchen cooking some steaks. We were drinking and smoking, and all of a sudden Pac was like, "Yo, come get it." And we go into the kitchen, and he had steaks and French fries and bread and Kool-Aid, and we just sitting there eating and drinking and laughing. That's truly where Big and Pac's friendship started. Tupac was already a platinum-selling artist. Biggie was still up and coming. Tupac took him under his wing. He gave him advice. They became friends. But the friendship wouldn't last. By 1993, Two record labels dominated hip-hop: Bad Boy Records on the East Coast, founded by Sean Puff Daddy Combs, and Death Row Records on the West Coast, co-founded by Marion Suge Knight and Dr. Dre. Bad Boy signed Biggie. Death Row signed Tupac. The labels were rivals, and that rivalry would become personal. On November 30th, 1994, Tupac Shakur was in New York City. He was scheduled to record a verse at Quad Studios in Manhattan. He needed the money to pay his legal fees. He was standing trial on sexual abuse charges. As Tupac entered the lobby of the building, three men approached him. They demanded his jewelry. Tupac resisted. They shot him 5 times. 2 bullets hit him in the head. 1 in the hand. 1 in the groin. 1 in the thigh. Tupac survived. But he was convinced that the attack was a setup. And he believed Biggie knew about it. Members of Junior Mafia, a group affiliated with Bad Boy Records, had been in the studio that night. Tupac thought Biggie and Puff Daddy were involved. He thought they set him up. There was never any evidence to support this. Biggie and Puff Daddy denied any involvement. They were never charged. But Tupac believed it, and that belief destroyed their friendship. While Tupac was recovering from the shooting, he was convicted on the sexual abuse charges. He was sentenced to prison. That's when Suge Knight made his move. Knight visited Tupac in Clinton Correctional Facility. He offered to post Tupac's $1.4 million bail. In exchange, Tupac would sign with Death Row Records. Tupac accepted. Knight flew across the country, rented a limousine, and picked Tupac up from prison on October 13, 1995. Tupac joined Death Row, and the rivalry with Bad Boy Records exploded. At the 1995 Source Awards in New York City, Suge Knight took a shot at Puff Daddy on stage. Any artist out there that want to be an artist, stay a star, and won't have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the records, dancing? Come to Death Row, Knight said. The crowd booed. Death Row artists were on enemy territory. When Dr. Dre won Producer of the Year, the boos intensified. Snoop Dogg grabbed the microphone. The East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Death Row? Y'all don't love us? Y'all don't love us? Snoop yelled. The tension was explosive. Tupac began releasing diss tracks aimed at Biggie, Bad Boy, and the entire East Coast. In February 1996, Biggie released Who Shot Ya?, a B-side track. The lyrics seemed to reference a shooting. Tupac was convinced the song was mocking him, taunting him for getting shot at Quad Studios. Biggie insisted the song had been recorded before the Quad Studios shooting, that it wasn't about Tupac, that it was just a coincidence. Tupac didn't believe him. In June 1996, Tupac released Hit 'Em Up. It's one of the most brutal diss tracks in hip-hop history. Tupac attacked Biggie directly. He claimed he slept with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans. He threatened violence. The lyrics included, "Grab your Glocks when you see Tupac / call the cops when you see Tupac, / who shot me? But ya punks didn't finish / now ya bout to feel the wrath of a menace." Tupac also rapped, "That's why I fucked your bitch, you fat motherfucker." Faith Evans denied the claim. She said it devastated her, that Tupac dragged her into a war she didn't want to be part of. Biggie was furious, but he didn't respond with a diss track. He tried to stay above it, but the damage was done. Hip-hop was divided. Fans chose sides. East Coast versus West Coast. Bad Boy versus Death Row. Biggie versus Tupac. And it wasn't just music anymore. It was personal. It was violent. Gang affiliations made it worse. Death Row had ties to the mob Piru Bloods. Bad Boy had connections to the Crips. The rivalry wasn't just between 2 rappers. It was between 2 coasts, 2 labels, 2 gang sets, and people were getting hurt. On September 7, 1996, Tupac Shakur was shot in Las Vegas. 6 days later, he died. Biggie was devastated. Despite their beef, he didn't want Tupac dead. He wanted to squash the rivalry. He wanted peace. In an interview after Tupac's death, Biggie said, "We 2 individual people, we waged a coastal beef. One man against one man made a whole West Coast hate a whole East Coast. and vice versa, and that really bugged me out. I've got to be the one to try to flip it. On September 22, 1996, Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan convened a peace summit at Mosque Mariam in Chicago. The goal was to end the violence. Key figures in hip-hop attended. They called for a truce. They urged fans to stop the fighting. In February 1997, Snoop Dogg and Puff Daddy appeared together on The Steve Harvey Show. They held a press conference calling for an end to the East Coast-West Coast feud. "Kids around the world are watching," Snoop said. "By calling for a truce, we're giving them something to live for." But their efforts failed. On March 9, 1997, just 6 months after Tupac's death, Christopher "Biggie" Smalls Wallace was shot and killed in Los Angeles. He was leaving a party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. He was riding in the front passenger seat of a green GMC Suburban. They stopped at a red light at the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue. A dark-colored Chevrolet Impala pulled up alongside. The driver rolled down the window. He fired 6 shots from a 9mm pistol. 4 bullets hit Biggie. He was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. But it was too late. Christopher Wallace was pronounced dead at 1:15 a.m. He was 24 years old. 2 of hip-hop's biggest stars. Both killed in drive-by shootings. Both unsolved. The East Coast-West Coast beef had claimed 2 legends. And hip-hop would never be the same. After Biggie's death, another peace summit was held on April 3, 1997, at Farrakhan's Ministry in Chicago. Artists from both coasts attended. Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, The Dog Pound, Bone Thugs and Harmony, Fat Joe. They called for an end to the violence. The beef slowly died down, but the damage was done. 2 of the greatest rappers of all time were gone. And for 27 years, neither murder was solved. Until September 29, 2023. Drop a dove for Tupac and Biggie. Because the man who finally got arrested for Tupac's murder couldn't keep his mouth shut. And what he said will blow your mind. Duane Keefe D. Davis had a problem. He couldn't stop talking. After his 2009 proffer agreement with the LAPD, the deal that gave him immunity from prosecution, Davis was free. He walked on federal drug charges. He wasn't charged with Tupac's murder. He should have disappeared, kept quiet, lived the rest of his life under the radar. Instead, he decided to become famous. In 2019, Davis co-authored a book titled Compton Street Legend, Notorious Keefe D's street-level accounts of Tupac and Biggie murders, death row origins, Suge Knight, Puffy Combs, and crooked cops. The tagline on the back of the book read, "The last living eyewitness to Tupac's murder is telling his story." In the 225-page memoir, Davis described his life as a drug dealer. He bragged about shooting up neighborhoods, operating crack houses, and battering women. He admitted providing the proffer to federal investigators in exchange for a pass on drug charges. And he confessed to being in the white Cadillac on the night of September 7, 1996. Davis wrote that he obtained a .40 caliber Glock pistol after the MGM Grand beating. He wrote that he passed the gun to the men in the back seat. His nephew Orlando "Baby" Lane Anderson and DeAndre "Big Dre" Smith. He didn't explicitly say who pulled the trigger, but he strongly implied it was Orlando. Davis wrote, "We couldn't let no record company studio gangsters do us like that. Had they lost their fucking rap pin-ass minds?" He was talking about Tupac and Death Row Records. The beating in the MGM Grand lobby. The disrespect. Davis made it clear. The shooting was retaliation. Revenge for the beating. And he was there. He was part of it. He orchestrated it. The book was published 23 years after the shooting. It was released not long after 2 documentaries, Death Row Chronicles on A&E and Unsolved. The Tupac and Biggie murders on USA Network brought the case back into the public spotlight. In 2018, Davis appeared in the Unsolved docuseries. He sat for an on-camera interview and admitted his involvement. "I was in the front passenger seat," Davis said. "The car was driven by Terrence T. Brown. Anderson and DeAndre Dre Smith were sitting in the back seat. All of us were Southside Crips. The shooter was in the back seat." He declined to name the shooter. He cited street code, but everyone knew what he was saying. Orlando Anderson was in the back seat. Orlando Anderson was the shooter. Davis also appeared on multiple podcasts and YouTube channels. He gave interviews to DJ Vlad, The Art of Dialogue, and others. He bragged. He told stories. He described the night in detail. In one interview, Davis said, "I'm a legend in my own mind." He thought he was untouchable. He thought his 2009 proffer agreement protected him. He thought he could profit from being the last living witness. He sold books. He got paid for interviews. He became a minor celebrity in the true crime world. But there was a problem. The 2009 proffer agreement only covered statements Davis made during that specific proffer session. It didn't cover anything he said after. Legal experts warned him. Greg Kading, the LAPD detective who had interviewed Davis in 2009, even said publicly that Davis's hubris would be his downfall. "You have to understand the hubris of Keefe D," Kading told reporters. "He is a legend in his own mind, and a legend wants to tell his own version of the story and hope to get continued notoriety." Kading continued, "As long as the judge allows all of his public statements to be introduced as evidence, then I think it's going to be overwhelmingly compelling." Criminal defense attorneys agreed. They said Davis's post-proffer statements, his book, his interviews, his public admissions were fair game for prosecutors. Robert Langford, a former prosecutor and defense attorney, explained, "Proffer agreements are very limited in scope. They only cover the specific interview. Anything said outside of that can be used against you." Davis didn't care. He kept talking. Prosecutors cited his own words, his book, his interviews, his documentaries. Chief Deputy District Attorney Mark DiGiacomo told the court, "Mr. Davis formulated a plan to exact revenge upon Mr. Knight and Mr. Shakur because of the MGM grand beating." DiGiacomo continued, "Duane Davis was the shot caller for this group of individuals that committed this crime. He orchestrated the plan that was carried out. The prosecution's case was built almost entirely on Davis's own admissions. They didn't have the murder weapon. They didn't have the white Cadillac. They didn't have witnesses who could place Davis at the scene, except for Davis himself. But they had his confessions, his book, his interviews, his own words. It's called a confession," one legal analyst said. Davis appeared in court on October 4, 2023. He pleaded not guilty. His attorney at the time, Ross Goodman, told reporters, "There's no gun, there's no car, and there's no witnesses from 27 years ago." He argued that Davis's statements were exaggerated, that they were made for profit, that they shouldn't be trusted. But prosecutors disagreed. They believed Davis told the truth in his book and interviews. They believed he was there. They believed he orchestrated the murder. And they believed a jury would convict him based on his own words. If you think Keefe D talked himself into prison, comment below, because his defense strategy will surprise you. If you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. For 27 years, the Tupac Shakur murder case was cold, but it was never forgotten. Las Vegas Metro Police homicide detectives kept the file open. They reviewed evidence. They chased leads. They interviewed witnesses. And they watched Duane Keefe D. Davis. When Davis published Compton Street Legend in 2019, investigators took notice. When he appeared in the Unsolved docuseries in 2018, they watched. When he gave interviews on podcasts and YouTube channels, they listened. Davis was essentially confessing on camera. He was admitting to being in the car. He was describing his role. He was bragging about it. Lieutenant Jason Johansson, head of the Las Vegas Metro Homicide Bureau, told ABC News in 2023, Davis's own public words reinvigorates the investigation. By 2023, investigators had a strategy. Use Davis's own admissions to build a case. Get a search warrant. Find physical evidence. Then arrest him. On July 17, 2023, Las Vegas Metro Police executed a search warrant on Davis's home at Maple Shade Street in Henderson, Nevada. The home was owned by Davis's wife, Paula Clemens. Davis had been living there for 9 years. Officers arrived with a detailed warrant. The judge had authorized a nighttime search. an unusual step that's only granted in exceptional circumstances. The warrant allowed officers to search for electronic devices, phones, computers, tablets, photographs related to Tupac's murder, copies of Davis's book Compton Street Legend, any documents or materials related to September 7, 1996 ammunition, specifically .40 caliber bullets. The search lasted several hours. Officers seized Davis's phones. They collected hard drives. They found copies of his memoir. They took photographs. And they found .40 caliber cartridges, the same type of ammunition used to kill Tupac Shakur. The ammunition was sent to the Metro Crime Lab. Ballistics experts would compare it to the slugs recovered from Tupac's body and the BMW. Investigators also recovered a copy of a 1998 search warrant and a room receipt from the former Monte Carlo Hotel and Casino, where authorities say one of Davis's associates stayed at the time of the shooting. In this case, prosecutors argued that Davis supplied the gun, directed the other men, and orchestrated the drive-by shooting. That made him guilty of first-degree murder. Davis was taken to Clark County Detention Center. He was held without bail. On October 4, 2023, Davis made his first court appearance. He pleaded not guilty to one count of murder with use of a deadly weapon. He requested a 2-week delay so he could hire an attorney. The court granted the request. Eventually, Davis hired defense attorney Carl Arnold. Later, he switched attorneys again, this time to Robert Draskevich and Michael Pandello. In early 2024, Davis's legal team filed a motion arguing that the 2009 proffer agreement should apply to all of Davis's statements, including his book and interviews. They argued that Davis believed he had blanket immunity, that he thought the proffer agreement protected everything he said, that prosecutors couldn't use his statements against him. Judge Carly Kearney reviewed the motion. In her ruling, she rejected the argument. She found that the proffer agreement only covered statements made during the 2009 interview. It didn't cover anything Davis said afterward. His book, his interviews, his public statements, all of it was admissible. It was a major blow to the defense. Davis's attorneys also filed a motion to suppress evidence from the July 2023 search. They argued that the nighttime search warrant was improper. In the motion, they claimed the warrant was based on a misleading portrait of Davis, that it painted him as a dangerous gang leader, when in reality, he was a 60-year-old cancer survivor who worked as an inspector for oil refineries. The court wasn't told any of this, Davis's lawyers wrote. As a result, the court authorized a nighttime search based on a portrait of Davis that bore little resemblance to reality. They argued that nighttime search warrants should only be granted in exceptional circumstances, when there's a likelihood that evidence would be destroyed during a daytime search. The defense claimed there was no such risk, that Davis wasn't going to destroy evidence, that the nighttime search was unnecessary and unlawful. Judge Kearney has not yet ruled on this motion. The hearing is pending. Meanwhile, prosecutors were building their case. They reviewed Davis's book line by line. They transcribed his interviews. They compiled every public statement he made about the shooting. They also gathered testimony from witnesses who were at the MGM Grand that night. Witnesses who saw the beating of Orlando Anderson. Witnesses who saw Tupac leave the hotel. And they prepared to present all of it to a jury. In January 2024, Davis was granted bail. The judge set bail at $750,000 and allowed house arrest. But there was a problem. Davis couldn't come up with the bail money. He tried to use his home as collateral. But the home was owned by his wife, not him. He tried to get a bail bondsman, but no one would take the risk. So Davis stayed in jail. Months passed. The trial was delayed multiple times. In December 2024, Davis got into a fight with another inmate at Clark County Detention Center. He was charged with battery by a prisoner and challenges to fight. He pleaded not guilty to those charges too, but he was found guilty and sentenced to 16 to 40 months in prison with credit for time served. It was another setback. In August 2024, Davis changed lawyers again. He hired Robert Draskevich and Michael Pandello, two veteran defense attorneys. Draskevich immediately filed a motion to delay the trial. He argued that the amount of discovery was voluminous. that they needed more time to review the evidence. Prosecutors did not object. Judge Carly Kearney granted the delay. The trial was pushed from February 2026 to August 10, 2026. As of February 2026, Duane Keefe D. Davis remains in custody at Clark County Detention Center. He's 62 years old now, a grandfather, a cancer survivor, and he's facing life in prison for a murder he allegedly committed 30 years ago. If you think 30 years is too long to wait for justice, let's hear it in the comments section, because Keefe D's defense strategy might actually work. Duane Keefe D. Davis sits in Clark County Detention Center. He's been there since September 29, 2023. He's charged with first-degree murder in the death of Tupac Shakur. If convicted, he faces life in prison. But Davis says he's innocent. In March 2025, Davis sat for an exclusive jailhouse interview with ABC News. Sitting on a wooden bench under harsh fluorescent lights, Davis insisted he didn't write his own memoir, and hasn't even read it. "I've never read the book," Davis said of Compton Street legend, on which he shares credit as co-author. He claimed his co-author took artistic liberties, that the book wasn't accurate, that he just gave the writer details of his life, and the writer went and did his little investigation and wrote the book on his own. Davis also addressed his TV interviews and public confessions. "I shouldn't have said nothing," Davis said. "I'm innocent, man, and God got my back and God will see me through this." He described himself as a good man long retired from the drug game. He said he should be home, watching his grandchildren grow up and tending to his garden. "I did everything they asked me to do. Get new friends. Stop selling drugs. I stopped all that," Davis said, referring to police and prosecutors. "I'm supposed to be out there enjoying my twilight at one of my grandson's football games and basketball games, enjoying life with my kids." But most shocking of all, Davis claimed he wasn't even in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996. For the first time, Davis asserted an alibi. He said he was in Los Angeles that night, at home, hundreds of miles away from the shooting. "They ain't got no evidence," Davis told the Art of Dialogue podcast in 2024. "They don't got nothing. They know they don't have nothing. They can't even place me out here. They don't have no gun, no car, no Keefe D, no nothing." It's a complete reversal from everything he's said for the past 15 years. Davis's defense strategy is clear. Deny everything. Claim the confessions were lies. Blame someone else. Present an alibi. But there's a problem. Davis spent years bragging about being there. He wrote a book describing his involvement. He appeared in documentaries admitting he was in the car. He gave interviews detailing the plan. How can he now claim he wasn't there? His attorneys argue that all of those statements were made for money, for profit, for entertainment. Defense attorney Carl Arnold filed a motion in early 2025 claiming that Davis's private investigator has identified several witnesses that cast doubt on the official version of events. Arnold alleged, without presenting backup evidence, that Reggie Wright Jr., who worked security for Suge Knight's Death Row Records, and his security team were actually responsible for Tupac's death. Reggie Wright Jr. and his team orchestrated the shooting, Arnold claimed in the filing. He said his private investigator is interviewing witnesses that will be able to testify to these issues at the time of trial. This is a bold claim. It suggests that Death Row Records' own security team killed Tupac, not Southside Crips members seeking revenge for the MGM Grand beating. The defense is essentially arguing Keefe D made up a story about killing Tupac to get famous and make money. The real killers were Death Row insiders. Reggie Wright Jr. responded to the allegations. Keefe D confessed to Tupac's murder to the LAPD in 2008, to the Las Vegas Metro PD in 2009, and then publicly from 2018 to 2023 on BET, multiple YouTube interviews, and in a book about his life, Wright Jr. said. "And he's only now using the media to slander me because he finally got arrested and has no other defense." Wright Jr. denied any involvement. He has never been charged in connection with Tupac's murder. So what will the defense argue at trial? Based on pretrial motions and interviews, here's the strategy. 1. The confessions were lies. Davis will argue that he made up the story about being in the car, that he exaggerated his involvement, that he only did it for money to sell books, get paid for interviews, and gain notoriety. The problem: why would someone falsely confess to murder, especially when that confession could send them to prison? Prosecutors will argue that Davis told the truth in his confessions, that he was proud of his role, that he wanted credit for killing a legend. 2. The 2009 proffer agreement protects him. Davis's lawyers argued that he believed the proffer agreement gave him blanket immunity, that everything he said afterward was protected. The problem: Judge Carly Kearney already rejected this argument. She ruled that the proffer agreement only covered the 2009 interview. Everything Davis said afterward, his book, his interviews, is admissible. 3. There's no physical evidence. Defense attorney Ross Goodman told reporters after Davis's arrest, "There's no gun, there's no car, and there's no witnesses from 27 years ago." It's true. The murder weapon has never been found. The white Cadillac was never located. The other 3 men who were allegedly in the car are all dead. But prosecutors don't need physical evidence if they have a confession. And they have multiple confessions from Davis. 4. Someone else orchestrated the murder. The defense is now claiming that Reggie Wright Jr. and death row security were responsible, that they framed the Crips. The problem: there's no evidence for this. It's speculation, a conspiracy theory. Prosecutors will argue that the defense is throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to create reasonable doubt by pointing fingers at anyone else. 5. Davis has an alibi. Davis now claims he was in Los Angeles on September 7, 1996, not in Las Vegas. The problem: for 15 years, Davis said he was there. He described being in the car. He described following Tupac's BMW. He described pulling up at the red light. Now he says he was 270 miles away. Prosecutors will argue that this is a desperate lie, that Davis is changing his story because he's finally facing consequences. The trial is scheduled for August 10, 2026. It will likely last several weeks. The prosecution will present Davis's book, his interviews, his documentaries. They'll call witnesses who can authenticate his statements. They may call Reggie Wright Jr. to refute the defense's allegations. They may call gang experts to explain the Southside Crips' motive for revenge. The defense will try to create reasonable doubt. They'll argue that Davis is a liar, that his confessions can't be trusted, that someone else killed Tupac. And then a jury will decide. Will they believe that a gang leader spent 15 years bragging about a murder he didn't commit? Or will they believe he finally got caught for a crime he orchestrated? If you think Keefe D is guilty, comment guilty. If you think he's innocent, comment innocent. Because this trial will determine whether justice is finally served, or whether Tupac's murder remains unsolved forever. August 10, 2026. Just 6 months from now. Duane Keefe D. Davis will walk into a Las Vegas courtroom. He'll sit at the defense table. He'll face a jury of his peers. And he'll stand trial for the murder of Tupac Shakur. The trial is expected to last several weeks. Judge Carly Kearney will preside. Chief Deputy District Attorney Mark DiGiacomo will lead the prosecution. Defense attorneys Robert Draskevich and Michael Pandullo will represent Davis. The courtroom will be packed. Media from around the world will cover the trial. Hip-hop fans will watch every moment. Because this isn't just a murder trial. It's the resolution of a 30-year mystery. It's justice, finally, for one of the greatest rappers of all time. Or it's the wrongful prosecution of a man who lied for profit. The jury will have to decide. What will the prosecution's case look like? They'll start with the timeline. September 7, 1996. The Mike Tyson fight. The MGM Grand beating. The drive-by shooting. They'll present surveillance footage showing Tupac and his entourage beating Orlando Anderson. They'll establish motive, revenge. Then they'll present Davis's confessions. His 2019 book Compton Street Legend. His 2018 appearance in the Unsolved docuseries. His interviews on podcasts and YouTube channels. They'll read his own words. I was in the front passenger seat. I obtained a .40 caliber Glock. We couldn't let no record company studio gangsters do us like that. They'll argue that Davis told the truth, that he was proud of his role, that he wanted credit for being the last living eyewitness to Tupac's murder. They'll call Greg Kading, the former LAPD detective who interviewed Davis in 2009. Kading will testify about the proffer agreement and Davis's confession. They may call gang experts to explain the Southside Crips culture, to explain why revenge was necessary after the MGM Grand beating. They'll present evidence from the July 2023 search of Davis's home. The .40 caliber cartridges, the electronics, the photographs, and they'll argue that Davis orchestrated the murder, that under Nevada's felony murder rule, he's just as guilty as the person who pulled the trigger. Chief Deputy DA Mark DiGiacomo will tell the jury, Duane Davis was the shot caller. He formulated the plan. He supplied the gun. He directed the other men. He is guilty of murder. What will the defense's case look like? They'll attack the confessions. They'll argue that Davis lied for money and fame, that he exaggerated his role, that he made the whole thing up. They'll point out that Davis has now recanted, that he claims he wasn't even in Las Vegas that night, that he was in Los Angeles. They'll call witnesses to support the alibi, if they can find any. They'll attack the lack of physical evidence. They'll remind the jury, there's no gun, there's no car, there's no witnesses from 27 years ago. They may present their alternative theory, that Reggie Wright Jr. and death row security were responsible, that they framed the Crips. Defense attorney Robert Draskevich will tell the jury, Keefe D is a storyteller. He wanted to be famous. He wanted to sell books. So he made up a story about killing Tupac. But he didn't do it. Someone else did. And the prosecution has no evidence, just the words of a liar. The big question, will Duane Keefe D. Davis testify? If he takes the stand, prosecutors will grill him. They'll confront him with his own words, his book, his interviews, his documentaries. They'll ask, Mr. Davis, you wrote that you were in the car. Were you lying then? Or are you lying now? They'll ask, Mr. Davis, you said you obtained a Glock and passed it to the back seat. Was that true, or was it fiction? They'll ask, Mr. Davis, you said you were the last living eyewitness. If you weren't there, how would you know what happened? Davis will have to explain himself, and his explanations might not be believable. If he doesn't testify, the jury will only hear the prosecution's version. They'll see the confessions without any explanation. It's a risky decision either way. After both sides present their cases, the jury will deliberate. They'll review the evidence. They'll discuss the confessions. They'll debate whether Davis is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. If they convict, Davis will be sentenced to life in prison. At 62 years old, he'll likely die behind bars. If they acquit, Davis will walk free. The case will remain unsolved, and Tupac's family will be left without justice. But there's a third possibility, a hung jury. If the jurors can't reach a unanimous verdict, the judge will declare a mistrial. Prosecutors would then have to decide whether to retry the case. What happens if Davis is convicted? He'll be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Because the murder occurred in 1996, before Nevada changed its sentencing laws, Davis could theoretically be eligible for parole after 20 years. But given his age, he'd be in his 80s by then, it's unlikely he'd ever be released. Davis would spend the rest of his life in a Nevada prison, far from his family, far from his grandchildren, and Tupac's family. His mother Afeni passed away in 2016, but his siblings and other relatives would finally have some measure of justice. What happens if Davis is acquitted? He'll walk out of the courtroom a free man. He'll return to his home in Henderson, Nevada. He'll resume his life, but his reputation will be forever linked to Tupac's murder. Even if a jury finds him not guilty, millions of people will still believe he did it, and the case will remain unsolved. Tupac Shakur's murder, one of the most famous unsolved crimes in American history, will stay cold. No one else will ever be charged. The other 3 men who were allegedly in the car are dead. Davis is the last man standing. If he's acquitted, that's the end. For Tupac's family, for his fans, for hip-hop, there will be no closure. But if Davis is convicted, it will mark the end of a 30-year journey. Justice delayed, but not denied. As of February 2026, Duane Keefe D. Davis sits in Clark County Detention Center awaiting trial. He's been in custody since September 29, 2023. He's fighting additional charges from a jailhouse fight in December 2024. His trial is 6 months away, and the world is watching. This is Crime Case Voices. Thank you for watching. Trial starts August 10, 2026. Subscribe for verdict coverage when it happens. Drop a balance scale for justice. Share this video so Tupac is never forgotten. 27 years of silence. Finally broken. One arrest, one trial, and one chance for justice. Say his name. Tupac Amaru Shakur. Born June 16, 1971. Died September 13, 1996. Age 25. One of the greatest rappers of all time. Taken too soon, but not forgotten. Will Keefe D be convicted? Or will Tupac's murder remain unsolved forever? We'll find out in August 2026.